That's a clown question, bro.
So I'm gonna kick some dirt.
He gets on base.
Just a bit outside.
I'm not the type of player that's going to be Johnny Hustle.
If you don't want me to watch the ball, you can go get it out of the ocean.
Welcome to the show to be named later, where we're talking baseball, kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm coming straight off some KBO action out there in Korea. Electric. Big Twins guy over here.
Yeah, I mean that's the most of the two people I've seen who have talked about the KBO. That's the team they're rolling with. So I mean, I guess we have to go with that team.
Mm-hmm. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You know, you don't usually expect the KBO to be shown on ESPN, but when a global pandemic hits and Korea is good to go, you got to do what you got to do, Chris.
Yeah, and I mean it kind of teaches us a new culture of baseball. I'm still kind of rolling with the throwback train because honestly, I've been going chronologically watching but playoff games from like earlier this decade, and I want to get to the 2015 playoffs because I barely remember them for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, hey, I'm just saying maybe one day we'll be forced to.
Yeah, maybe one day, but you know, it's maybe. But KBO is definitely keeping us entertained at the moment.
For sure.
You know, it might be something that kind of fades away, but right now, pretty exciting stuff.
Live baseball. We haven't had that since, I guess spring training, but other than that, the World Series last year.
Yeah, live competitive baseball.
Yeah.
Games that are trying to be won. And, there's definitely a need for that. And South Korea is definitely giving that to us. But,
absolutely.
that was the only major thing to happen in the MLB world or the baseball world as of late. But today we are doing an entire episode dedicated to – first half of the episode is going to be dedicated to Albert Pujols' career. Yes, the man in the background right there. And the second half of the episode, we are going to be talking about the season of the 1995 Braves and how they were able to kind of finally tie the knot there.
Yeah, it was a long time coming.
Yeah. So first half of the episode with going to Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols grew up in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Kind of like
By the way, I think this is our second straight Latin American player.
Yeah, second straight Latin American player. Fittingly on Cinco de Mayo.
Of course.
As this is being recorded.
So, MLB Network had Albert Pujols Day yesterday to hype up this show, of course. Yesterday, as in the day that we're recording this. We're recording on Cinco de Mayo. You're probably going to be seeing this later. But as of now, in our time, that's the date.
Yeah. Obviously on Cinco de Mayo, and yesterday was the anniversary of his 3,000th hit. So I think that's kind of why the day was dedicated to him. But that's for later in the episode. So he grew up in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, and kind of had a folky tale, like a kind of just in folklore. He would use limes as baseballs and a milk carton as a glove. And I don't know how the milk carton thing worked. It's just what I read in a Sports Illustrated article. I'd really like to see how that worked. Maybe I can Google some pictures of that, but definitely. He didn't.
Cut
He
a
didn't
hole,
have.
cut a hole in the milk carton.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't made by Rawlings or Mizuno or anything like that. Definitely, uh, definitely not that. And baseball. I guess baseball was kind of in his DNA. His father was a great softball pitcher in his community, but he was a seemingly good guy, but sometimes he would get blackout drunk, and he would have to be dragged and carried by a young Albert Pujols back to the house. And Albert was about 10 when this started happening, so I wonder how long the treks were, but I really hope
Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't anything huge.
Santo Domingo's doesn't have a good reputation among baseball players for being the safest place. David Ortiz is another guy who grew up in that area, and I read part of his book, and he talked about like how like he had to be taught at a young age like what cocaine looked like, and he had to like learn like if anyone gives this to, don't take it, don't do anything with it, and run away. Like he would have to stop playing in the yard early at night because he'd hear gunshots. So I mean, yeah, obviously not the safest neighborhood, not even close to that. And as a young kid, being 10 years old like Albert was, like that's a huge obstacle in your life, especially when you're trying to get to where he eventually made it to.
Yeah, definitely a huge distraction. You don't have the best, materials available. You don't have the best gear available, and also you have to worry about street life depending where you are in the Dominican Republic.
You got to
Um,
survive the day.
yeah, and yeah, you notice a lot of guys who came out of the Dominican Republic, once they start getting money, they start giving right back to the Dominican Republic because they know how much it needs to be improved.
Hmm.
So maybe that was part of the reason that Pujols, along with his father and grandmother, immigrated to New York City in 1996 when he was 16. From what we're aware of, 16 years old, and his stay in New York City was not very long because, speaking of gunshots, saw a man get shot at a grocery store, and then the Pujolses made the sojourn over to Independence, Missouri, where I'm guessing, I've never really heard of the place. Probably less gunshots for sure. Probably a nice rural
Area.
place in Missouri. And, he didn't know a lot of English, but one language he did know, of course, was baseball. So goes in his senior year of high school. People did not believe he was 18 at all.
This is ridiculous, this senior year that he had at Independence.
Yeah, people did not believe he was 18 at all. I don't know if they had validation. They may or may not have, but it's not about that. What it's about is he was walked 55 out of 88 plate appearances in protest because teams did not believe that he was 18.
That alone is a 625 OBP.
That alone. And then when you add in
Like the hits.
in his 33 at bats, he had 8 home runs.
Yeah.
That already gets you almost a 1,000 slugging percentage, not even including singles or doubles or triples.
Mm-hmm.
So that was his senior year. He doesn't get drafted out of high school. Maybe, not enough eyes got to him. So he goes to Maple Woods Community College, which was in Kansas City, Missouri, close to home. And, of course, when he goes to that community college, hits .461 with 22 home runs in what I would guess was a relatively short season. I don't think they were playing much more than 50 games. So
Yeah.
22 home runs is really something to admire there. And that performance was able to get him drafted. And, obviously it's drafted way too low, probably if you do a redraft, would be the number one pick in that draft. But he was drafted in the 13th round, not the 13th pick, the 13th round. Was drafted.
Your team had at least probably 12 chances to draft Albert Pujols, and they didn't.
Yeah, of course. And if you're a Cardinals fan, they
lucky.
had 12 chances and got him on the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets drafted by the Cardinals in the 13th round. And teams had whatever biases they had, kind of dumb biases. Some didn't think that he was actually his age, and in all sports, youth is definitely valued. So you'd rather draft a guy who you think is 19 instead of a guy who you think is 21. But I mean, I think the lines are kind of blurred in the later rounds. But anyway, the Kansas City Royals were kind of scrutinized mainly because, I mean, they were right next door. They were right in Kansas City to see Maple Woods Community College. And the quote from Alan Baird, who was the general manager of the Kansas City Royals at the time, said, we all saw Albert about the same way. We weren't sure he had a position. He didn't have a great baseball body. We all saw him the same way, and we were all wrong. So
obviously it makes sense that they're getting scrutinized for that in hindsight, but like in the moment, he was in the 13th round. The Cardinals probably didn't have the highest of expectations for him when they drafted him either.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna get into, because a 13th rounder in the minors doesn't really get a lot of respect. You're definitely on a deadline to start producing, because if you don't produce, there's 40 more guys, or at the time 50 more guys that are going to try to take your spot. So there's definitely it's definitely time to get going once you get drafted, and that's exactly what Albert Pujols did. So he goes to A-ball in Peoria, and he slashes 324, 389, 565 for a 953 OPS. He played most of his season there, and that slash line was able to get him to skip Double-A, and he actually went to Triple-A for the brief rest of the regular season, and then he goes into the postseason, and he wins postseason MVP in the Pacific Coast League playoffs, which of course was in Triple-A, and that definitely made an impression on the Cardinals organization.
Very easy top 100 prospect.
Yeah, and he gets invited to Cardinals training camp, but he still doesn't have that same respect as a top prospect. He's a non-roster invitee, and he was he goes in. He's not supposed to get a ton of at bats, but he just makes some sort of impression to the manager Tony La Russa, and he's able to make the roster right out of camp.
That's right. And he ended up having his rookie season with St. Louis in 2001, making it out of training camp, like Chris mentioned, as a non-roster invite. Really impressive. And he did quite a bit of everything for St. Louis in his first year. He played 39 games in left field, 39 games in right field as well, 42 at first base, and 55 at third base. Keep in mind, this is when Mark McGwire was at first base for the Cardinals. And for the whole season, he slashed 329, 403, 610, 1013. Really good, especially for a rookie that just made it out of training camp. And by the way, from July 28th to September 22nd of that very season, he had a 48-game on-base streak, which he slashed 377, 447, 705, 1152. The highest OPS and most RBIs, which he had 130 of, by a rookie since 1939, Ted Williams at the time. He easily won Rookie of the Year. He was also fourth in the MVP voting. And the Cardinals did end up making it to the playoffs that year. They made it in the wild card spot. But unfortunately, Pujols and the team struggled against the eventual World Series champion Arizona Diamondbacks. So that is Albert Pujols' already destructive rookie year. Chris, a lot of these discussions that we've done on these players, it's always like, they had a couple like May years here, and then they really started to pick it up. Albert Pujols hit the ground running as soon as he got to the majors, and he just didn't stop.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So then in 2002, he mostly plays left field, including with 03 as well. Tino Martinez was at first base. And in 2002, he had a 955 OPS, second in the MVP voting, also an 883 OPS in the playoffs. They did not end up making it to the World Series, however.
Yeah, and 955 OPS, that ended up probably being the worst season of his first 10 years,
Yeah.
which is crazy considering that he finished second in the MVP voting. And then things really, like, he was already kicked into gear, and now he's on like 11th gear, if that exists. 2003, he wins the batting title with a 359 batting average, also has a 439 on base, a 667 slugging, and an 1106 OPS. Led the league in hits, runs, and doubles, and finished second in the NL in Baseball Reference WAR, and second in the MVP voting. We all know who was winning MVPs in 2001 to 2004, so we definitely understand why that was the case. And he
Make no mistake about it, Albert Pujols was not robbed in any of these years.
Yeah, for definitely not. And he is one of three players after that 2003 season. It made him one of three players in the live ball era to have a 1,000 career OPS through their age 23 season. And the other two players were Ted Williams and Jimmy Fox, two of the greatest pure hitters ever.
And
Then,
for reference, you mentioned the live ball era. That is 1920. We're talking.
Yeah. And you also have to consider, Ted Williams played in the 40s and 50s. Fox played in like the 20s and 30s for the most part. This is the first time this has happened in about 60 years. Mm-hmm. About 60 years this has happened. And, he's definitely, making a name for himself for sure. Then in 2004, there's no one in the way for him at first base. He becomes a full-time first baseman rather. And
for the first time,
now he's comfortable where he is defensively, because I can't imagine he was really excited to strap it on as a left fielder every day. Then he hits very well again, has a 1,072 OPS, but it's not about, in 2004, it was not about what he did in the regular season. Everyone knows about, how great of a hitter he was in the regular season. It's about what he did in the postseason. And this team does not get to the World Series without Albert Pujols, without a doubt. In the division series against the Dodgers, goes 5 for 15 with 3 walks, has 2 home runs and 5 RBI, and also 0.41 win probability added, which is, pretty high, especially for a 4-game series. And it was a 4-game series because in Game 4, it was tied 2-2, and he hit a go-ahead 3-run home run, and the Cardinals eventually win that game, sending them to the NLCS. And you think 5 for 15, 3 walks, I mean, that's a very good series. Folks, that was just a warm-up. In the NLCS, he really turns things on. Game 1, 2 for 3, 2 walks with a home run and 2 RBI. He got on base in 4 out of 5 plate appearances. Then in Game 2, goes 3 for 4 and really clutches it up. As I'm about to show you right here. Situation is, it's 4-4. St. Louis is ahead in the series, 1-0. It's 4-4 in the bottom of the 9th. And here's the at bat. Looks like he's leading off the inning. Here we are. a solo shot to take the lead for the Cardinals, which makes it 5-4. The batter after him, Scott Rowland, actually hit a home run as well, making it 6-4. They win that game, and they are ahead 2-0, basically on the back of Albert Pujols. Then Game 3, the Cardinals end up losing that game. I think he only got on base one time in that game. Game 4, he's back to playoff Pujols, 3 for 4, a walk, a home run, and 3 RBI. And they still lost the game, unfortunately, for the Cardinals. And the series was tied 2-2. Game 5, I don't even know what happened in Game 5. I mean, the Astros were able to figure him out for one game. He doesn't get on base at all, or I don't think he got a hit. He might have gotten on base, but he didn't get a hit. And the Astros won that game. Astros are up 3-2, looking ahead to what might have been their first World Series at the time. Not sure.
Yes.
But in Game 6, you have to rely on Albert Pujols. He has to come back, and that's exactly what he does. He has a 3 for 5 game, a walk, a home run, and 2 RBI in what ended up being an extra inning victory that tied the series up. In Game 7, they win that game, and Albert Pujols is named the NLCS MVP. Of course, you have to give it to him.
Easiest decision ever.
Yeah, easiest decision ever. He went 14 for 28. That is a 500 batting average, a 563 on base percentage, 1,000 slugging for a 1563 OPS.
Pretty good.
4 home runs and 9 RBI.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely insane for one series.
And he has a pretty decent series in the World Series, but Red Sox came off the greatest series comeback probably in sports history, and he wasn't really gonna carry the team on the back for that one. The Red Sox
Red Sox were loaded on momentum in that series. They had just come off, like you said, the best comeback in sports history. Nobody was.
And he was still able to go 5 for 15 in that series. It's just there weren't a lot of guys for him to drive in. Just the cards did not align, or the stars did not align. The cards did not align. The stars did not align for the Cardinals.
The cards didn't either.
Yeah, but the stars did not align for that one. But Albert Pujols still has a lot of opportunities to do more playoff things in the future.
In the future, I guess we'll go forward to 2005. The very next year, Albert Pujols does what no one else in the NL has done since 2000, and that is not be named Barry Bonds and win the NL MVP. That's right. Lord Barry gave the rest of the league permission to win MVPs, and naturally the torch was passed down to Albert Pujols. Of course, he wins his first Most Valuable Player award with a 1039 OPS, as well as 16 stolen bases. And the Cardinals once again made the playoffs, and they swept the National League Division Series. Pujols going 4 for 9 with 4 walks, 3 of them being intentional. And in the NLCS, unfortunately, they lost the series. But probably the highlight of that entire series wasn't even the team that won. It was Albert Pujols coming up to the plate against a red-hot Brad Lidge, the Astros closer, facing elimination down to their final out. Houston was ready to celebrate going to the World Series, just 1 out away. And what does Pujols do? Is he gonna rain on the parade, or is he gonna lay down and die?
Here it is.
That is 40,000 people just dying inside in 1 second.
Absolutely.
The Astros do end up winning the next game and move into the World Series. And the Cardinals would seek a better opportunity in 2006, and Pujols would be at the forefront of that. He sets career highs in home runs with 49, RBIs with 37, and OPS 1102. An 1102 OPS. That obviously led the MLB. He hit 397 with runners in scoring position. He won his first Gold Glove, and he leads the NL in WAR, but he lost the MVP to Ryan Howard, who had 58 home runs and 149 RBIs. A generational year for Ryan Howard. So I guess you really can't get too upset at that one. And he was pitched around a lot in the playoffs. 13 walks in 16 games, a 439 OBP throughout the playoffs with a 959 OPS. And oh, by the way, he helped the Cardinals win a World Series that year.
Sorry, my mom was calling me. She totally forgot that I was doing the show.
Nice.
So yeah, Albert Pujols, where'd you leave off?
He won the World Series for the Cardinals in 06.
Yeah, won the World Series. Yeah, and he wasn't at the forefront of the postseason performances, but he was definitely he was rewarded for everything that he did in 04 and 05. And he was obviously, as you said, the numbers were very good in 2006 as well. I mean, it's tough to produce when you're getting walked almost one time per game, and obviously the pitch, there was nothing going over the middle of the plate. Wasn't a lot of straight fastballs for him. So definitely earned that World Series. And then in 2007, he has, for him, I guess, a down year. Still led the National League in wins above replacement, had a high defensive wins above replacement. So whatever metrics Baseball Reference had, that they had him having his best defensive year in 2007. Still had a 997 OPS and a career low 9th in the MVP vote. A career low 9th in the MVP vote.
Oh.
But he's able to make up for that in 2008, where he has probably the best season of his career. Hits 357, which wins the batting title, I'm pretty sure. Has a 462 on-base percentage, a 653 slugging, and an 1114 OPS. That 1114 OPS, by the way, remains the highest OPS in a single season since 2005.
That's
It
right.
is the highest OPS in a single season in the last 15 years.
And the only guy that's stopping that from going any further is Barry Bonds.
Yes. If Barry Bonds wasn't there, I guess Maguire and Sosa were there too.
Right.
But definitely since the offense really amped up or juiced up, I guess. And in 2009, he continues his dominance, has an 1101 OPS to go along with 16 stolen bases. The guy was really doing everything. The 16 stolen bases is considerably surprising. You don't really think about him being fleet of foot necessarily, but was able to get 16 stolen bases. I think that's what Mookie Betts had this year, and to go along with an 1101 OPS, won MVP unanimously for the first time in his career. Then the Cardinals go into the playoffs, but he's pretty much pitched around again because of his reputation, especially in the playoffs. Goes 3 for 10, also with 3 walks. That's a walk per game, has a 462 on base percentage, and the Cardinals ended up getting swept by the Dodgers. And he led. So that ends the decade. That ends the book on the 2000s, and he leads the National League in F4 in the 2000s, and that's with him not even playing in the year 2000.
Yeah. It's 9 years against 10, and he still came out on top.
Yeah.
So in 2010, he has the end of his career with St. Louis. It's a 1011 OPS in 2010, which led the NL. He also led the NL in WAR. He won his second Gold Glove and finished second in the MVP voting that year. And in 2011, he had a career low 906 OPS. His career was a decade old, and he still hadn't seen a sub 900 OPS, which is ridiculous. Finishes fifth in the MVP voting. He goes 7 for 20 with 2 walks in the National League Division Series. They win that series. He goes 11 for 23 in the NLCS with 4 walks, 2 home runs, and 9 RBIs. His slash line of 478, 556, 913, 1469 to advance to the World Series. And in the World Series, he accomplished something that only 2 other men had done beforehand. Chris is going to pull up a highlight video real quick.
And that makes it 11-6 here in the 6th. His third hit of the night, his first home run of this World Series. And this thing was blasted. This is how you turn around. Heard about it. Cardinal fans know it. Here's one into left center field. Back at the track, he's got another. As he's hit a 3-run shot, now a 2-run shot. And the Cardinals lead it 14-6 in the 7th. For his last 4 at-bats. 5 RBIs, 3 runs scored. Albert Pujols, after being hitless for the first 2 games, is heating up. Base hit did the same in the 5th, a 3-run rally, and then hit a 3-run home run. The 6th and a 2-run shot in the 7th. Rangers fans thinking I had to watch Pujols have 4 hits, 2 home runs. And he hits me, and here goes one in the left. How about 3 on the night in a row? 3-run shot, a 2-run home run, and now a solo blast. And Albert Pujols has tied Reggie Jackson with 3 home runs against the Rangers in Game 3.
So Albert Pujols, it's 3 home runs in the World Series. The most impressive part of that, his first home run was in the 6th inning.
Yeah. And like,
He was definitely he was lucky to get even close to a third at bat in that time frame.
yeah, I mean, it definitely shows what the Cardinals offense was able to do that night.
Mm-hmm. And the Cardinals also ended up winning the World Series that year. And that would, unfortunately, for better or for worse, be it for Albert Pujols' Cardinals career.
Yeah, and what he did with the Cardinals is absolutely historic. What will be his first 10 years will be talked about till the rest of time. I mean, from 2001 to 2010, this is Willie's, 2001 is his first year, and from 01 to 2010 leads all of baseball in wins above replacement, also leads all of baseball in doubles, runs, average at 331, slugging at 624, and OPS at 1050. The slugging and OPS are minimum 4,000 plate appearances because of a guy previously mentioned would not allow Pujols to lead slugging and OPS because of what he was able to do early in the decade. But minimum 4,000 plate appearances led in the entire Major League Baseball in slugging and OPS. And then from 2003 to 2009, which was the prime of the prime, he led in all of those categories and home runs, RBI, and on-base percentage. So he was basically the whole Rolodex of offense. Albert Pujols was at the top of that list. Then you look at it from a historical perspective, how does it compare to the rest of baseball history, going back to 1871, going back to the first World Series, 1903. In his first 10 seasons, of all Major League Baseball players in their first 10 seasons, he had the second most wins above replacement of all time, behind Ted Williams, and he was first all time in home runs for players in their first 10 seasons, had 408 home runs in those first 10 seasons, was basically on track to be the home run king. And also in those first 10 seasons had 7 8-win seasons. That's wins above replacement, of course. 7 8-win seasons in those first 10 years. He's the only player to ever do that. Only player to have 7 8-win seasons in the first 10 years of his career.
Ridiculous.
And between 03 and 09, which I talked about just now, he is the only, or he's not the only. So he had 7 8-win seasons in a row. All those 8-win seasons were in a row. The only other players in MLB history to do that were Willie Mays and Babe Ruth. Good company.
Yeah, that's you could argue those are the best 2 players of all time, and then there's Albert Pujols right with him. So he leaves St. Louis and signs with the Los Angeles Angels. 10-year, $240 million contract. That would be the second biggest contract in baseball history at the time. The one person ahead of him was A-Rod with $252 million. And his first year with the Angels was quite a down year alone. I remember in 2012, if you go to Fangraphs, he pretty much set career lows across the entire dashboard. And still a 30 home run season, which is pretty impressive. But he was never really able to replicate his Cardinals tenure in LA. So far, a 258, 314, 450, 764 career slash line with the Angels. Also, 278 average with runners in scoring position, averaging 96 RBI per year. And, as he comes late into his career, the milestones start to hit. So on April 22nd, 2014, the Angels were in Washington. It was the big Mike Trout, Bryce Harper matchup, but the real eyes were on Albert Pujols as he was sitting on 499 career home runs. Actually, I think he hit his 499th and 500 that game, if I'm not mistaken.
And here it is.
So Albert hits his 500th home run, and he wasn't going to stop there. On June 3rd, 2017, I actually remember this day. I was watching this game live. It ended up being a grand slam, and there were like 8 or 9 grand slams across baseball that day. It was just a crazy day, and one of them being Albert Pujols' 600th career home run. He became the 9th player to ever do that. So there it is. Albert Pujols hits his 600th career home run. He currently has 656, I believe. So he is
Yes, 656.
he's only 4 away from tying Willie Mays. So he's got some time to go. Also, on May 4th, 2018, he becomes, I believe, the 28th member, if I'm not mistaken, of the 3,000.
32nd.
30. Is there really that many? Wow. Okay, I was dead wrong. He becomes the 32nd member of the 3,000 hit club in Seattle. Very un-Pujols-like hit, but 3,000 is 3,000. Chris, roll the tape.
The BABIP gods were definitely with Albert Pujols on this one.
It's a flare out to right field. And hit number 3,000 for Albert Pujols. The fourth player in Major League Baseball history with at least 600 home runs and 3,000 hits. Joining Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and Alex Rodriguez. Add Albert Pujols to that list.
What a moment this is for Albert with his teammates, his family here. History in Seattle here.
So I mean, you heard those names there that were also on the 600 home run, 3,000 hit club. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Alex Rodriguez, Albert Pujols. That is some good company right there.
Yes. And Pujols, obviously a very religious man, because I just noticed when first thing he does is he hits first base, he lets out a very passionate thank you to the sky.
Yep.
I found that pretty humorous. Definitely a fun way to thank God there.
I mean, hey, he had to go through a lot of obstacles to get to that point. You know, he could have very easily not made it out of Santo Domingo. So it does, like, I'm definitely not going to knock him for it at all.
Yeah, we're definitely going to, and, you know, he definitely carried that into what he was able to do humanitarianly, which we're going to get into in our last Pujols segment of the episode.
That's right. We have another milestone. On May 9th, 2019, he becomes the 4th member of the 2,000 runs batted in club. This is one that sort of didn't get as much recognition, but definitely deserves so. And of course, he does it with a home run.
There's recorded one strikeout. That was of Albert in the first. This one's out to deep left field, and that is long gone. Big fly for Albert Pujols. Career RBI number 2,000. What a moment for Albert Pujols. 639th home run results in RBI number 2,000 in his career. It is the 3rd player in the history of the game since it became officially kept back in 19.
I'm glad so many people got to see that.
Yeah, the crowds in Detroit. I mean, that's an exclusive ticket, though. You know?
Yeah.
There is one more, I guess it's not really a milestone, but one other thing I wanted to share that isn't on the prep sheet. In 2019, Albert Pujols, this was long overdue, but he made his return to St. Louis as a visiting player. And Chris, why don't you real quick get this video pulled up? He did the absolute perfect thing here. First of all, he gets a standing ovation in every single at-bat throughout the weekend series. I believe he had 14 plate appearances. He got a standing ovation, and the game stopped for each and every one of them. And during the Saturday game, he did what everyone in the crowd and around the world was hoping he would do. And it was a beautiful moment in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's hard to filter through here. There's about 9 minutes of video, but I mean, basically kind of, I'll turn the volume down a little bit, or, you know, you can see just the appreciation. And, you know, sometimes we like to acknowledge the St. Louis fans in a negative way, but they do love their baseball players.
Yeah.
I mean, how perfect is it that, like, it wasn't even a home run that was going to affect the game? Because I feel like the reaction would be a little different if it was, like tied
Ninth
4-4,
inning, like
and it was
Cardinals
go
win the
ahead.
playoff runs.
Yeah, it was kind of a, essentially useless home run. So that was perfect to have in Busch
Perfect.
Stadium.
And you have to figure Dakota Hudson was probably throwing a meatball there anyway.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you
And,
definitely have to consider that.
I mean, how often do you really see that kind of an ovation in a standing O for a visiting player? Like the only times I can really think of in like modern history is that and Chase Utley returning to Philly.
Yeah, you never really see that. I mean, it wasn't, quite the reception, but Mike Yastrzemski got some cheers at Fenway, but it wasn't like the entire stadium was standing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't see that.
And by the way, why did it take so long for him to go back to St. Louis? Like this is 2019 and he signed in 2012. Why did the schedule makers not do that sooner?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, usually you're at a ballpark every 6 years at the least.
They should have done that immediately. Like the first time the Angels and Cardinals play each other, got to be in St. Louis, got to have Albert Pujols.
Yeah, I mean, that was his age, 39 or 40 season. I mean,
it was last year.
It could have been but I mean, thankfully for his contract, I don't think he would have retired, but
yeah,
he might have not been able to play,
exactly.
As a 39-year-old.
But hey, he still had it and hit a home run right into the bullpen.
Yeah, and if you're wondering why the reception was so wonderful, it's because he's one of the all-time greats, and he did most of that with St. Louis. Where he ranks amongst A, active players, and B, everyone in MLB history. He's 6th all-time in home runs with 656. He's 15th all-time in hits with 3,203. 7th all-time in doubles with 661. 5th in total bases, and 4th all-time in RBI with 2,075. And he is the active leader in all of those categories I just mentioned, along with plate appearances, at-bats, runs, walks, intentional walks, and sacrifice flies. And, you saw that he has a lot of doubles and a lot of home runs. He is the only player in MLB history to have 650-plus home runs along with 650-plus doubles. He's talk about exclusive. He's the only one to ever do that.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 19,000 men have stepped on Major League Baseball fields. We've gone through Babe Ruth. We've gone through Rogers Hornsby. We've gone through Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Barry Bonds. Nobody else did that. Albert Pujols did it, though.
Yeah, and it speaks to how pure of a hitter he is. He's going to get on base whenever he can. I mean, that's one thing that I saw that I took away from in MLB Tonight's episode or show about him. Mm-hmm. He was like, I'm a line drive hitter who can hit home runs. That's a testament to how pure of a hitter you are.
Yeah.
You can hit. He's literally a career 300 hitter, and he's 6th all time in home runs. Can't get any better than that.
Chris, you know what he is?
Yeah, he's
a machine.
He's a machine. Yeah, he's a machine.
He's the machine.
He's the machine. Yeah. So he, as I'm mentioning, he is still active. He's our first player that we're covering that is active. There may or may not be another active player or two. But he is the first one we are covering. So we have to cover, what his potential is. So he needs 5 home runs to pass Willie Mays. He needs 41 to pass Alex Rodriguez. And if you want to fly a bit close to the sun, if he hits 59, he passes Babe Ruth and becomes 3rd all time. But
it really sucks that coronavirus is cutting his potential season short. Like this this could be time we look back on is like, man, Albert Pujols really could have done something. He could have got to 714. He could have got to 696 to get A-Rod. He could have, he could have been up to third. Like, I don't see him beating Aaron or Bonds, but if you really, like you said, if you really want to fly close to the sun, he could beat Babe Ruth.
Yeah, if you want to do that, if he's able to be healthy, and because he's still, his OPS isn't great, but he's still pumping out home runs and RBI.
Yeah.
And he's also getting hits as well. He needs 118 hits to get into the top 10 and past Paul Molitor, who is a show to be named later history episode alum. And he needs 12 RBI to be third in RBI.
Crazy.
And also, if we want to fly close to the sun, he needs 223 RBI to break the record. And, he's averaging, with the Angels, he's averaging 96 per year. So his contract ends.
And he's going to have Anthony Rendon in the lineup with him, too.
Yeah, you have Trout and Rendon ahead of you. And, his contract ends after 2021. I think he said that he wants to play through the contract and maybe after. So, who knows the potential records that Albert Pujols could break. But you do mention that he is the machine.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the comedian who told the story about robbing the Russian mafia. He's the machine. He is the, 6th all time in home runs, 15th all time in hits. There's a reason why they call him that. And SportsCenter paid homage to that nickname, which is what I'm going to show to you. Probably the funniest thing we have about Albert Pujols. And do you know when this aired?
I don't. I'm assuming it was like late in his Cardinals tenure. I mean, obviously he has the Cardinal uniform on there. I don't know the exact day though.
Yeah, I would imagine that was probably 08 or 09.
Yeah.
When he was solidified as like the best player in baseball.
Yeah.
Hey, there he is, the machine. What are you talking about? That's what they call you, right? Machine. I know the machine. The machine. The machine, right? Guys. I know the machine, okay? It's Albert.
I'm just Albert.
The machine. Why didn't you eliminate them, Albert? Shut up.
There he is.
ESPN hits the nail on the head on those commercials every single time. They never miss.
Yeah, that was peak SportsCenter. Like
For sure.
late 2000s SportsCenter was amazing. Like Stuart Scott, all those guys.
R.I.P. Stuart Scott. Yeah. Yeah, I remember in my childhood, I would watch ESPN before school every single day in like middle school. And like every time I'd see a new one of those commercials, I'd be like, oh, here we go. Like this is gonna be a good one.
Yeah. You have Dale Earnhardt digging out the speed bump.
That was Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson. I think
Dale
Dale Earnhardt did another one.
Yeah, I think he did. There's so many good ones. The Eli Manning and Peyton Manning one where they're like taking the tour of the facility and they're like fighting with each other.
Yeah, like it's just spectacular premise after spectacular premise.
They nail it every single time on those.
But yeah, the machine was more than what he showed on the field. So his story, he has the Pujols Family Foundation. His story is that he met his wife, Dee Dee. He was 18 in a 21 and over club. So she had the impression that he was also 21. Dee Dee was actually 21, and she already had a daughter who happened to have Down syndrome. And, Albert Pujols actually married Dee Dee and helped raise the daughter. Her name is Isabella. And in 2005, he decides to start the Pujols Family Foundation, which seeks to improve the lives of those with Down syndrome and also to improve the lives of the impoverished in the Dominican Republic, as I mentioned, giving back back home. In 2008, he won the Roberto Clemente Award, which was, named after the guy that we did an episode about last week. You can go listen to that. And he was definitely really special in St. Louis with the National Down Syndrome Society. St. Louis would host a buddy walk for National Down Syndrome Society every year. And on those days, while he was with the Cardinals, he hit 6 home runs. And this article was from 2009. Mm-hmm. It was from 2008. So it had been that it was 6 home runs in 8 of those games, I believe. And yeah, he was always told, someone would throw the first pitch and they'd ask Albert to hit a home run for them. And most of the time it came through.
Yeah.
And, he's kind of a hero in that community, also the Dominican Republic, and definitely deserving of that Roberto Clemente Award in 2008.
For sure.
So that wraps up our Albert Pujols half of the episode, for sure.
I have a few takeaways.
Yeah.
My main takeaway is that, listen, the guy's still going. So when baseball does come back, if you're going to watch the Angels, you're probably doing it for Mike Trout, and we understand. But let's not forget who the other guy is a couple spots behind him in the order and what he has potentially left to accomplish. Like, just remember that we are still watching one of the greatest of all time. You still have that opportunity. So you might as well take it while we don't have it for much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, despite him not producing the same amount of numbers, he's the same guy in the box. It's the same swing. I think he has the same exact attitude that he had as a rookie.
Yeah.
He's a master of hitting, and even if he doesn't have the physical ability, he still has that mental sharpness. And, maybe this year or the next year, the Angels can maybe get into the playoffs, and maybe we could get a little more our last sights of playoff Pujols.
I would not be opposed to that at all. I mean, like I just mentioned, a lot of people want to see the Angels in the playoffs for Mike Trout. You have Anthony Rendon coming up now. And Pujols does get lost in the shuffle, but we are still watching one of the best of all time. Like I just said, I will repeat that as long as I need to, because like you said, he's 5 home runs away from passing Willie Mays, and Alex Rodriguez and Babe Ruth are not too far after that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely could be done in the next 2 seasons. And, obviously this pandemic is altering that, but maybe it's giving him some needed rest, and maybe he can come back after 2021.
Another 1100 OPS season.
Yeah, maybe he's just revamped and he wins MVP. It's him and Mike Trout at the MVP race. But yeah, that wraps up our Albert Pujols segment of the episode. In the snap of a finger, we will be talking about the 1995 World Series champion Atlanta Braves. And we're back for the 1995 Atlanta Braves portion, not just 1995, but the 1995 Braves portion of the episode.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the World Series champions. What was the direction that the Braves were kind of going in at the time?
So the Braves had been competitive for quite a while. In 1991 and 1992, they won the NL pennant, and they lost the World Series to the Twins and the Blue Jays, respectively. In 1993, they also won the division, lost in the National League Championship Series to the Phillies. And in 94, they were 68-46, in position to make the NL wild card. Of course, they were behind the Montreal Expos, who were 6 games up in the division and had by far the best record in baseball. But of course, the strike shortened the season. There was no World Series. The playoffs were canceled, and the strike actually went into the start of the '95 season. The Braves played their opening day game in like late April. So
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, it was very weird. So I mean, they had been competitive for a while, and their core was, only getting older. So they needed to jump on the opportunities while they had them, and they did not get out to that kind of start that they wanted. In fact, they were 20-17 into early June, which is obviously not what you want at all when you're trying to defend a title and you should be on top and you should be that hungry to get a World Series. They also had a 5-game losing streak to put them 4.5 games out of the division lead. And David Justice had gone on the disabled list. David Justice was one of their top offensive hitters at the time. The offense was just not – it was lacking. The bullpen was kind of here and there. They didn't really have a closer. And they just needed somebody to step up. So who is it going to be? Well, it was not going to be the guy you expected. It was Mark Wohlers. He is a guy from Holyoke, Mass. Shout out to Western Mass. It's only about 20 minutes from where we go to college. And the magical turning point was on June 5th, by the way, June 5th, 1995, also 2 days after my parents got married. So shout out to mom and dad there.
Yeah.
But on June 5th in the baseball world, the Braves defeated the Cubs 7-5. It was a pretty standard game. Steve Avery actually homered, believe it or not, as a pitcher. But Mark Wohlers came out of the bullpen and recorded his first save of the season. And he was not the traditional closer, but they decided to try out him as the closer going forward because he pitched a scoreless ninth, didn't allow any hits, did walk a guy, but nonetheless shut it down when they needed to.
Yeah, and he wasn't even spectacular in the middle innings beforehand, but once he got in the ninth inning, I mean, it was all him. There was no doubt that he was going to be the closer of that 1995 team. And yeah, once he's the closer, the team kind of just takes off for whatever reason. Maybe they had that security. Maybe it was just Wohlers' performance. But he gets the team going. The Braves won 17-3 after that June 5th game. Put in by 14, definitely sets the tone for the rest of that basically entire first half.
Mm-hmm.
And from June 5th through the end of the first half, which is the All-Star break, went 24-8. 24-8 in that 32-game stretch between June 5th, and the rest of the first half. And right before the All-Star break, end on a 9-game winning streak.
Right.
To really set themselves as the best team in that National League East for sure. So at the time, as mentioned, best record in the National League. And right in that 9-game winning streak, this team really made an identity as kind of the late inning heroes, the guys who were just kind of able to get the timely hits. And on July 5th, they weren't just blowing teams out of the water. They still needed their clutch hits. And who do they get it from? They get it from a rookie. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Chipper Jones. Comes in the 9th inning tie game, 2 out in the bottom of the 9th.
Chipper Jones bat left-handed, and the Dodgers pay for it. He thinks he's got it, and right about here, he knows he's got it.
And there it is. Chipper Jones with, I would guess, was his first career walk-off, first of probably many.
Oh yeah.
In his career, and they didn't get it just from the stars. They didn't just get it from the non-stars. Everyone was able to get in on the late inning action. And 4 days later, Fred McGriff is able to show you that. Fred
Crime
McGriff
dog.
comes in. They're down 2 against the San Francisco Giants, the team that had – or no, they weren't the team, but the team they were really competitive with in the 1993 season and probably competitive with for this season as well. But it's 2-0 San Francisco. McGriff's got a 1-2 count on him, 2 men on. Let's see what happens. Walk-offs were a lot different back then.
Oh, yeah. That was a very calm celebration there.
It's almost like they got used to it, and there's a good reason why they got used to it. They ended up getting 13 walk-offs that year.
That's right.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, that was on Sunday Night Baseball, primetime television. You got
Right
John
before the
Miller
All-Star
and Joe
break.
Morgan on the call.
Yeah.
So, and that was pretty much right. Yeah, that was how they ended the first half. Go right into the All-Star break off of that. Fred McGriff for that hit and many other hits. He gets the start at first base in the All-Star game, and he's not the only guy to go to the All-Star game from the Braves. Greg Maddux, who was having a spectacular season, also goes to the All-Star game. And I would guess the only reason he didn't get the start is probably because he had a start a couple days prior and didn't want to hurt his arm.
Mm-hmm.
And, a little anecdote about the team as well. On June 12th, the team was so red hot that their plane actually caught smoke after a series in Montreal, which definitely seems very, very hazardous. It's almost too good for their own good.
Yeah. I mean, hey, when you're hot, you're hot.
Yeah.
So the strong play continued on in the second half. They went 46-29 after the All-Star break. And like Chris mentioned, the 13 walk-off wins throughout the regular season. And, you have your Chipper Jones, your Fred McGriffs, your David Justices, these bigger names. But they got these big walk-off contributions and these late-inning heroics from everyone. And one person I wanted to point out, Dwight Smith. You may know him for being the father of Dwight Smith Jr. from the Orioles, who just played in the MLB Players League for MLB The Show. In his 39th plate appearance of the year, in his 19th game, he comes in off the bench to pinch hit against the Marlins down in the game and delivers in one of the most incredible ways you can possibly think of ending a game.
Yeah, he comes in virtual unknown to the baseball world and makes his name in the state of Florida.
There's a drive. Deep right field, and the Braves win. A grand slam for Dwight Smith.
Well, I guess they used him in the right spot. I still don't understand it.
So
yeah.
Dwight Smith, of all people, like I mentioned, his 39th plate appearance in his 19th game. And the team ended up winning the division. They won the NL East with a 90-54 record. That would be the best in the National League.
Yeah, they basically cruised, basically from the time Mark Wohlers became closer. You can debate the correlation that was there, but from the time Mark Wohlers took over as closer, they basically cruised their way to an NL East title, and no one was really in their way to stop them. Just like those, Florida Marlins, weren't able to stop the Braves. And Mark Wohlers had a really, really special year especially for a guy you don't really hear about. 1995 was his showcase year, for lack of a better term. And after taking over the closer's role on June 5th, he had a 1.45 ERA in 49 and 2/3 innings. He was 25 for 27 in save opportunities, and he only allowed one home run. Again, 49 and 2/3 innings, only one home run allowed. And he had 70 strikeouts, which was about 12.6, 12.7 per nine, to go along with just 12 walks, has a 5.8 strikeout to walk ratio. And of all pitchers who pitched 50-plus innings in 1995, he was second in strikeouts per nine and first in fielding independent pitching. He had a 1.88 fielding independent pitching, which is, you can see why the team was able to do a lot better while he was the closer. I mean, 25 for 27 in save opportunities, a 1.88 FIP for the entire year. That's not even including what he did from June 5th on. But that wasn't even the best season as a pitcher from the Braves that year. Greg Maddux, I mean, what else can you say about the guy? Ridiculous. Greg Maddux, this 1995 season is becoming one of my more favorite season, kind of more under the radar seasons in baseball history. You think of great seasons, and you very well should. You think of, 99 and 2000 Pedro. You think of 68 Gibson.
14 Kershaw.
You could think of any year between 99 and 2002 for Randy Johnson. But Greg Maddux in 1995, this is another season you should think of. This was his fourth of 4 Cy Youngs in a row. One Cy Young unanimously, and very well deserved, as you're about to hear, and finished top 3 in the MVP voting. Crazy year from Greg Maddux. Had a 9.7 baseball reference WAR. And you also have to consider, the team only played 144 games. If he's in a full 162 game season,
he's getting a 10.
That WAR could be near 11.
Yeah.
And that 9.7 baseball reference WAR was just way above and beyond the rest of the National League. There was no other pitcher in the National League who had more than 5 wins above replacement.
He nearly doubled the field.
Nearly doubled the field, yes. And his winning percentage, which was .905, is the highest winning percentage since 1875, minimum 20 decisions. Not 1975. That would be impressive, last 20 years, highest winning percentage. It's 1875, 120 years it had been since someone with at least 20 decisions had a higher winning percentage than Greg Maddux in 1995. And not only that, that's just the start of, this historic, where you put it among historic seasons. His ERA plus is the 4th best single season ERA plus of all time among pitchers with more than 105 innings. Most all time. And of those with 205 plus innings, he has the lowest slugging percentage in a single season in the last 40 years, and the least amount of extra base hits allowed in a single season in the last 50 years.
By the way, I know we mentioned this earlier, but 205 innings pitched in a shortened season. Think about that.
Yeah, he had 7.5 innings per start, which is something that you didn't see a lot back then, and you definitely don't see any of that now. And he was the only man with 11 plus decisions on the road to go undefeated on the road in a single season. Only man in MLB history, only man with 11 plus decisions on the road to go undefeated on the road in a single season. He went 13-0 and also had a 1.12 ERA. That 1.12 ERA is the lowest single season road earned run average in the last 50 years, minimum 80 innings pitched.
And by the way, it's not just, is it last 50 years and like now or last 50 years then?
Last 50 years now.
Okay, still.
Crazy stuff. And, he obviously did extremely well on the road, as I'm telling you. 8 of his 10 complete games were actually on the road. He felt at home when he was on the road. And I mentioned complete games. He had 5 complete games with less than 100 pitches. You hear the term Maddux, it's because of performances like that. A Maddux, it's literally verbiage in MLB now because of stuff that he did, in the 1995 season and the seasons before that. A Maddux is a complete game with less than 100 pitches. He had 5 of those in 1995, and he had 3 with less than 90 pitches. Mm-hmm. So most of those complete games with less than 100 pitches were actually less than 90 pitches as well. And where it ranks among all time, he has the 3rd. So since batting against stats were measured, it was in 1918. If you go back to 1917 and before that, you can't see like Walter Johnson's average against or on-base percentage against. So I can only confirm what he did how he compares since 1918. But he has the 3rd lowest single-season OPS against since 1918. His single-season OPS against, that was 482. He had a 482 OPS against. And you also have to consider he is in an offensive era. This is the mid-90s. This is when, the steroid era is hitting its stride. He had the 2nd lowest single-season OPS plus against in MLB history in that 1995 season. Hitters had a 29 OPS plus against, or hitters had a 29 OPS plus against Greg Maddux that season. It was an absolute tear of a year, and
not even fair.
People are going to have to remember this season like they remember, the 99 Pedros, the 2000 Pedros, the 68 Gibsons, because
all of the Randy
right
Johnson.
up there with it.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, that's only 1/3 of the Hall of Famers in this pitching rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Braves, of course, they had the big 3 at the top of the rotation. That's what's behind me right now. You see Greg Maddux to, I guess, directions right now. That guy right there, that's Greg Maddux. On top of me is John Smoltz. Over there is Tom Glavine. And speaking of Glavine, he finished 3rd in the Cy Young voting that season. And Smoltz, he ranked 5th in the NL in fielding independent pitching. So they both had great years as well. And let's talk about the rookie Chipper Jones. You mentioned him earlier with the walk-off home run. He finished 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting with an 803 OPS. Very good, especially to start his Major League campaign and later become who we now know as a near unanimous Hall of Famer. Javi Lopez, the catcher of the team, an 842 OPS, which ranks 2nd among catchers with 350-plus plate appearances. How about the youngster Ryan Klesko, his age 24 season? He had a 1,004 OPS, which was 3rd among NL players with at least 350 plate appearances. Marquise Grissom, their leadoff guy, he won a Gold Glove. Greg Maddux won one of his, 18 Gold Gloves that year?
Yeah.
Tom Glavine also won a Silver Slugger. And the team led the MLB in ERA and FIP with a 344 and 358 respectively. So now we go into the playoffs. It's time to prove themselves because, this team has been great in the regular season before, but if you don't win a championship, it doesn't matter. So game 1 of the National League Division Series, they played the Rockies, and it was the first playoff game in Rockies history. But unfortunately, it didn't exactly have the sports world's attention. Why? Well, that was the exact day, October 3rd, 1995, that O.J. Simpson's verdict came out, not guilty. So the sports world's attention was turned away from that a bit, but we did get some 9th-inning heroics in that game from Chipper Jones in a tie game. Was able to bring the Braves into the lead, a lead they would hold for the rest of the game. Chris, roll that tape.
Forgot to go to the YouTube video. Yeah, here comes Chipper Jones coming in, having a it's his first playoff game, and he's going to make sure everyone remembers his first playoff game.
That's right. So that second home run that you saw, that was in the 9th inning to put the Braves up, and they win 5-4. In Game 2, I guess the offensive player of the game was Marquise Grissom. He hit 2 home runs, and the Braves actually went down 4-3 in the 9th with Kurt Liskanek on for the save for the Rockies, and they ended up scoring 4 runs in the 9th to come back on RBIs from Fred McGriff, Mike Mordecai, and Rafael Belliard, as you're about to see.
That's tough.
So that ties the game.
The looping single to left. Still nobody out here at the top of the 9th. It's 4-4. Now a 3-0 pitch on the way to Mordecai. Back up the middle of the center field for a base hit. Fred McGriff out third, heading home. Here's the throw by Kingery. The slide. He is safe. The Atlanta Braves have taken a 5-4 lead. Mike Mordecai delivering a run-scoring single with 2 outs. Now Belliard steps in, grounds one to second. Young has it on to first, throws it away. 1 run is in. Here comes Mordecai. Down to second, Belliard. And the Colorado Rockies are self-destructing here in the top half of the 9th inning. The Braves now lead it 7-4. What a disappointing top half of the 9th inning for Don Baylor.
So obviously not RBIs for Belliard because those are on errors. But one thing you're probably wondering is who is Mike Mordecai, that guy who had the game-winning hit up the middle. I mean, he won the game for the Braves. Let me tell you about Mike Mordecai. After that game, he was interviewed about his hit, and he said, quote, "I'm not a household name, and it wouldn't bother me if I never was, but I'd like to be a world champion," which is, very good mentality from a guy of his caliber. But I saw that interview and I was like, you know what? I think it's only fitting on the show to be named later if we make Mike Mordecai a household name. So that's exactly what I did. I'm going to give you some Mike Mordecai stats here and make sure that this name is engraved in your head. In 1995, Mordecai hit 385, 407, 769 for an 1177 OPS in 26 plate appearances versus lefties. This is a guy that obviously, he was more of a pinch hitter off the bench guy, but when he got those opportunities against lefties, he came through. Also, that same season, he hit 412, 462, 706, 1167 in 39 plate appearances on the road. Like Greg Maddux, he felt at home on the road, and the best one, he hit 438, 524, 750, 1274 in 22 plate appearances in 1995 in the regular season with runners in scoring position. That is called making the best of your opportunities, Chris. And
Absolutely.
That's the best way to become a household name without really having to be a household name.
Yeah, to make a parallel or to a recent guy of memory, you could compare him to like Steve Pearce in 2018. And
Yeah.
I know this guy produced a little more, but even like Howie Kendrick in 2019 for the Nationals.
So, hey, Mike Mordecai, you're a household name on the show to be named later. And
Absolutely.
in Game 3, getting past that, the game actually went into extra innings, and Luis Polonia for the Braves hit a game-tying single with 2 outs in the 9th. So another blown save for the Rockies, but it was their turn this time for late-inning heroics. The winning run was delivered by Andres Galarraga, and the Rockies won on the road 7-5. So the Braves, they were still one win away from clinching, and they needed to get it done. And they had Greg Maddux going, so what could go wrong? Well, it turns out something could. In Game 4, the Rockies actually took a 3-0 lead off of Maddux, but the Braves' offense went off anyway. Marquise Grissom went 5 for 5 in this game. Fred McGriff had 3 hits, 1 home run, and 5 RBIs, and every Braves starter reached safely at least once, and the Braves ended up winning 10-7, and they advanced to the National League Championship Series. Chris, roll the tape.
Yeah, I'm just preparing these next clips. But yeah, 1995, the Braves are looking to advance to the NLCS, which isn't a big deal for them, but it's another stepping stone to get to that precious piece of metal.
The Braves a strike away from advancing. A hand swing, and they'll go to Cincinnati for the National League Championship Series. On a night when the Colorado Rockies score 4 runs off the premier pitcher of the game, Greg Maddux, and have a 3-0 lead. The Braves come from behind, win the game by a score of 10-4. And with Ted Turner and Gene Fonda looking on, they'll move to Cincinnati for the first game of the National League Championship Series on Tuesday.
How much does it suck to end your season on a check swing?
That's tough.
That's tough.
Yeah, I mean, you
It's
can't
tough to-
say you went down swinging, and you can't really even say you went down looking either.
Yeah, not really. Yeah, it goes down on a high fastball. And the Braves are in the National League Championship Series, a very familiar place for them.
But they were not supposed to win this. They were severe underdogs.
Yeah, did they have a worse record than the Reds?
No, they had the best record in the NL.
Oh, right. But
People just thought the Reds had the momentum because they swept the Dodgers in the division series.
yeah. And what we've learned from the show is sweeping does not always lead to momentum, but I guess the Braves can be a counterexample to that. But in Game 1, and I remember, I watched a couple of the NLCS broadcasts of the season, and the mood of the series was like, this is probably going to go about 7 games. And you could understand that because, it was very close the entire series. And also the Braves were kind of, not down a man, but, a man was compromised. David Justice got injured in Game 4 of the National League Division Series. He fouled the ball off his knee, and he was day-to-day as the series went on. You never really knew exactly if he was going to play. So that lack of security, especially on a team where the lineup isn't the most dominant aspect of the team, definitely something that kind of worries you if you're a Braves fan.
Yeah.
And, the offense didn't do great in Game 1, but they didn't need to be great at all. They go extras again because it was tied 1-1. Why was it tied 1-1? It was because Tom Glavine was able to really hold the Reds' offense down. Goes 7 innings, allows 1 run, gets 5 strikeouts, 2 walks. Actually had to pitch a lot with runners in scoring position, but I believe the Reds as a team for the whole game, I think they went 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position.
Yeah.
So Glavine and the rest of the staff were really able to make the best pitches when it mattered most. And, as I mentioned before, the game goes into extra innings, and that leads to, the late inning magic. This team is able to get things going in the late innings. You got Mike Devereaux up with a man in scoring position.
And that's lined into center field for a base hit. McGriff rounding third. Lewis's throw is offline, and it's 2-1 Atlanta. Devereaux advancing to second on the throw home. Mike Devereaux picked up toward the end of the season to provide added depth to do things like this, to come in off the bench in late inning situations and drives in a key run here.
So that gives the Braves the lead, as Al Michaels said, making it 2-1. They end up winning the game 2-1, but there's no sense of security. I mean, you just went into extra innings with one of the best teams in the National League. And what happens in Game 2? It's another incredibly close game. John Smoltz had a spectacular performance, and his counterpart also had a spectacular performance. I remember Smoltz, both the runs that scored off of Smoltz, the runners who got on via bunt. So they really had to stretch to get those runs. But luckily for the Reds, they were able to hold the Braves offense down. That was the case until the 10th inning. The Braves loaded up the bases, and a wild pitch actually scored the go-ahead run to make it 3-2. But 3-2 isn't the most secure lead in the world, and you need to make do with the runners you have on. And Javi Lopez is about to show you how he was able to do that.
Lopez hits one deep to left field and down the line, and that one is fair, and it's the foul pole screen. Six to two.
That thing was absolutely smoked.
No doubter.
Braves a 6-2 lead, and eventually the 2-0 series lead, heading back to Atlanta. And the Braves are probably in the ideal situation. They're back at Atlanta. They have a 2-0 series lead, and they've got Greg Maddux on the mound to try and get this victory. And Greg Maddux did what Greg Maddux is. He really, Greg Maddux, he's a great pitcher, but his playoff identity wasn't really set until this series. And Maddux really started to come into his own as a playoff pitcher. He went 8 innings, allowed 7 hits, 2 walks, 1 run, had 4 strikeouts. He shut them out for what I believe was the first 6 or 7 innings. And David Wells was actually able to shut the Braves out for the first 5 innings. But that stint came to a close when a Braves catcher not named Javi Lopez came up. Charlie O'Brien comes up to the plate with 2 men on. Has 2 strikes on him. You may be thinking that he's not much of a threat, but David Wells is about to be shown why you need to be careful around these Braves catchers.
2-2 to O'Brien. Deep to left field.
Gives them the 3-0 lead.
Yeah.
And they only needed that's all, those are all the runs that they needed. They end up winning the game 5-2, get some insurance runs. Maddux holds it down for the most part, and Wohler, I believe it was Wohlers who got the save. I think whoever came in the 9th gave up 1 run, but doesn't end up mattering at all. And in Game 4, Bobby Cox is confident in Steve Avery to have his first playoff start of the season, and it paid off for him, for sure. He goes 6 innings, allows just 2 hits, 3 walks, no runs, has 6 strikeouts, and the team a little late, or not, they got going with scoring a little earlier than they did in Game 3. Mark Lemke gets an RBI single in the third, and then Mike Devereaux breaks the game open with a 3-run home run to put the Braves on top, 5-0. And Steve Avery obviously shut it down, and leads us to the 9th inning, where the Braves are looking to get to their 3rd World Series in the past.
5 years, 4 seasons.
Yeah, 5 years and 4 postseasons.
Yeah.
The Braves are going back.
That's right.
Yeah, they, and it was funny. I mean, they were a little more excited out there, but when I watched the Braves World Series DVD, the interviews seemed pretty sedated because it's normal, and they didn't have a World Series at the time. It reminds me of like Bill Belichick when he wins the AFC Championship. He just kind of tosses the trophy to another person who probably appreciates it more. They were, poised and ready to go for the World Series. Some stats from that National League Championship Series. Mike Devereaux, he wins the National League Championship Series MVP, slashes 308, 357, 615 with a 973 OPS, has a home run and 5 RBI in those 4 games. Chipper Jones was spectacular. He hit 438 with an 1151 OPS in the series. Javi Lopez hits 357 with a 1000 OPS. McGriff hit 438 with a 1214 OPS. And the Braves' entire pitching staff, from the top to the bottom, from Greg Maddux to the middle innings guy, the team had a 1.15 ERA. The Reds batted .209, had a .282 on base percentage, .261 slugging, and .543 OPS against that Braves team. Reds just couldn't find their groove at all, like basically the entire rest of the league in 1995.
Yeah, that is right. So the Braves have gone on to the World Series, and they're facing the Cleveland Indians. And this Indians team, they're no joke, Chris. 144, 10 wins better than the Braves, might I add. The most runs per game and highest OPS since the 1953 Brooklyn Dodgers. Also, they led the AL in FIP. So this team was really good offensively, and they were really good with pitching. And it was, the Braves were really going to have to step up to this challenge like none other. And in Game 1, an unearned run scored by the Indians in the first. However, Fred McGriff was able to tie it in the second with a home run, and the Braves loaded it up in the 7th, and they scored on a fielder's choice and a suicide squeeze by Belliard. Maddux went 9 innings pitched, 0 earned runs. There were a couple unearned runs in there, 2 hits, 0 walks, and the Braves won 3-2. In Game 2, Javi Lopez stepped up and hit a go-ahead shot in the 6th. Chris, why don't you play that clip?
Yeah, here we are. It's tied 2-2. They're at, what was it, Turner Field?
It was Fulton County Stadium.
Fulton County Stadium.
Well, this was before Turner, ironically, because Turner's gone now.
Yeah, how crazy is that?
It did not last.
But here he is, Javi Lopez.
Another 1-2 pitch. Sidearm again, in the air to deep center. This at least gets a run home, maybe more. Lofton will watch it leave. That ball just kept on carrying.
That is El Presidente, Dennis Martinez.
In the postseason, snapping the 2-0
He had to have some power to hit that one out. That was right on the black. That might have been out of the strike zone.
So the Braves won 4-3. Of course, that put them up 4-2. The Indians' offense was held to an 0.96 average in the first two games. That beast of an offense with Albert Bell, guys like Manny Ramirez. They had, what else? Kenny Lofton. I mean, they had Jim Thome was on this team. You know, so many great hitters that just went completely silent. In Game 3, the team scored 3 in the 8th to take a 6-5 lead, and Sandy Alomar ended up tying it with an RBI double, and Eddie Murray from the Indians, another great hitter that I didn't mention there, he walked it off in the 11th. So the Indians won Game 3. And in Game 4, Klesko and Bell, being Ryan Klesko from the Braves and Albert Bell from the Indians, they trade solo home runs in the 6th. Luis Polonia drives in Marquise Grissom from first in the 7th, and David Justice hits a 2-run single to make it 4-1. That's just a brief summary of the scoring. But the Braves won 5-2, and they were one game away from winning the World Series, up 3-1. And in Game 5, the offense went a bit silent. Oral Hershiser went 8 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, and 6 Ks for the Tribe. Bell and Thome both hit home runs, and Ryan Klesko in the 9th homered for his 3rd straight game, but that unfortunately wasn't enough, and the Indians won it 5-4. So they're going back to Fulton County. The Braves are up 3-2. They still have one more win, and they had been in this situation before, and they knew not to be cocky about it. They knew that they couldn't celebrate until it was over. You know, Yogi Berra always said, it ain't over till it's over, and that's the exact mentality that the Braves had through this entire postseason. And in Game 6, the charisma took a little bit of a spin, as David Justice actually complained about the lack of energy that had been in Fulton County Stadium before the game. He said it didn't really live up to what it was in 91 and 92. And Tom Glavine, you know, he put on a strong performance in the game, 8 innings pitched, 1 hit, 0 runs, 3 walks, and 8 Ks. And who is it that brings the energy? None other than David Justice, leading off the 6th inning in a scoreless tie. Something needed to happen, and David Justice brings the energy.
Pitch. A long drive to right. Ramirez turns to the track. She's gone. Dave Justice. All is forgiven in Atlanta. Okay to talk the talk. You can walk the walk.
I love just a random Bill Murray cameo in that one.
Yeah. The Braves go up 1-0 in the 6th. And in the 9th inning, who else but Mark Wohlers is on for the save in a 1-0 game. Skip Carey had an absolutely legendary call of this. Chris, let's play some history.
51,000 plus on their feet. Nobody's left to beat the traffic tonight, I guarantee you. Mark gets the sign. The wind and the pitch, here it is. One, fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! The Atlanta Braves are giving your championship. Listen to this crowd. A mob scene on the field. Wohlers gets them 1, 2, 3. A couple of fans pressing on the field. And the constables restrain them. The Atlanta Braves have brought the first championship to Atlanta.
Yeah, literally the first championship in Atlanta. Their last championship was won 30 some odd years beforehand while they were in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm. So the first one with the Atlanta Braves franchise. And the Atlanta Braves finally win the World Series. It was long overdue, but it happened. Tom Glavine won World Series MVP. He went 2-0 with 14 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 runs, 6 walks, and 11 Ks. The team had a 2.67 ERA in the World Series, and the Indians batted 179, 273, 303 with a 575 OPS against the Braves. Ryan Klesko also went 313, 421, 875 slugging percentage for a 1296 OPS. Fred McGriff, 261, 346, 609 for a 955 OPS. And David Justice, an 850 OPS with 5 RBIs. So what is the legacy that this team leaves behind? Well, there was the one thing that came to mind for me was that they had just so much depth, and there was no like one guy that you wanted in the big situations. There wasn't like we need this guy and we need to look out for when this guy comes up. Everyone just stepped up. Mark Wohlers, we've talked about him so much and how key he was stepping up as the closer. He had a 4.55 ERA in the 2 previous seasons. Like this was not something you could have predicted at the season at all in spring training, that he was going to come up and be this lockdown closer. Mike Devereaux, the guy who won NLCS MVP, he was acquired late in the season, and he only had 57 plate appearances with the Braves. He steps up in that big way, especially when David Justice goes down. Chipper Jones, in his rookie year, he was one of the best offensive contributors to the team all season. Rafael Belliard, he became a starter in the World Series because Jeff Blauser couldn't play. He was hurt, and he had an RBI in Game 1 of the World Series. And also, Charlie O'Brien, the backup catcher of all people, hits a huge home run in Game 3 of the NLCS. And the thing that comes to mind is like, yeah, you have Greg Maddux, you have the big three. You have this Hall of Fame pitching staff with a star-studded offense with guys like McGriff and guys like Justice. You have a Hall of Fame manager in Bobby Cox. You have a Hall of Fame executive in John Shearholtz. But it was the unexpected guys that came through just as often.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, it was a star-studded team, but maybe the lack of, I guess, role players kind of held them back in 91, 92, and 93. I mean, they literally it was literally all hands on deck. I mean, Mike Devereaux was on the highlight reel countless times, and he's not, remembered as an absolute legend. Chipper Jones in his rookie year, making key contributions. Javi Lopez, one of the best offensive catchers that year. And then, you have the Mike Mordecai's, you have the Luis Polonia's, Rafael Belliards. Everyone was able to contribute positively, especially in the playoffs too.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was a threat. There was no single easy out.
Yeah, the fight in the team really helped them, and that's probably why they went 11-3 in the playoffs too.
Yeah, I mean, and there were so many of those games they could have lost. Like there were 2 games against the Rockies where they were down in the 9th. Obviously, they ended up losing one of them anyway, but still. And then you have 2 extra inning games with the Reds. You have some late inning drama with the Indians as well. I mean, this team very easily could have gone south if not for some huge late inning heroics in pretty much every game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in an alternate universe, this team gets bounced by the Rockies.
Exactly, by the Blake Street Bombers.
Yeah, who are in the 3rd year of their championship run, and maybe they never win a World Series, but that, the team was unbelievably clutch, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So is that all you got on the 1995 Braves?
The 1995 Braves, of course, the World Championship Atlanta Braves, the only Braves team to win to this point, and they are a very admirable bunch. Like when I watched, some of their post-game interviews, like I mentioned, they were very humble and they did not celebrate and they did not hint at anything until it was over, because they knew that, they've been there and lost so many times. They've been on the wrong end. They've gotten the short end of the stick so many times. And that was the time where they finally broke through when they needed to. And it became, just such an admirable team on all cylinders.
Yeah, and it wasn't even their best players weren't guys who were given crazy God-given talent. Their 2 best pitchers were guys who could locate and guys who could throw like great changeups. Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine. They were guys who probably barely scraped 90 at the time. Smoltz was really the only guy that was throwing kind of hard, and even him, he wasn't.
That was a power pitcher.
Yeah, he wasn't really a a guy that was blowing anybody away.
But he was, yeah.
He just had the tools. He, was able to mix speeds very well with a good slider and a good changeup.
And even guys like Steve Avery too. Like he stepped up in the playoffs when needed as a 4-starter.
Yeah. So it definitely represents the identity of this 1995 team. It wasn't, it wasn't all, a team full of, Randy Johnsons and Barry Bondses. There's guys who, just really knew how to play baseball along with, whatever talent they had.
I mean, for every Fred McGriff, there's a Mike Mordecai. For every Chipper Jones, there's a Mike Devereaux. For every David Justice, there's a Charlie O'Brien. It's the superstars were contributing just as much as the guys off the bench.
Yeah. So that leads us into our favorite part of the episode. I didn't mention it at the beginning of the episode.
I think it's kind of just tradition to address at the end of the episode. That's kind of what we do.
Yeah, I guess. And I guess it encourages people to listen to the other episodes just to figure out what's going on. But because there's no baseball going on right now, we've decided to, give a lesson to the listeners and mostly ourselves by looking at one player and one team per week, like Albert Pujols and the 1995 Braves. I've picked 30 players that have now been trimmed down to 25 because we've already done 5 players. And, Daniel is going to pick a number between 1 and 25, whatever number is assigned to that player. And the player's number is just random, not what they wore on their back. Whatever number he picks, that will be the player we will be talking about next week. And whatever number I pick, whatever team is assigned to that number, that is the team we will be talking about. So who picked first last time?
I think I did.
Yeah, I think that seems right. We'll just go with that.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter.
So Chris, 25.
I am going to go with number 15.
Number 15. Okay, this is yet another World Series championship team, a team that we have sort of discussed quite a bit on this show, particularly with the performance a one postseason legend, the 2014 San Francisco Giants.
Yes. Yes. This is a team
this is
basically carried by Bumgarner and basically clutch hitting for that postseason.
That's right.
Yeah, I was wondering what team you were going, what Giants team you were going to pick. It was going to be one of the 3 championship teams. Each one has their own cool identity, but this one I definitely remember the most.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I can
it's Daniel's turn
into this one. I'm gonna go with number 1.
Number
first one on
one
the list.
Number 1. So in the Albert Pujols portion of the episode, I mentioned he is one of 3 players to have 7 consecutive 8-win seasons. And one of the other players is number 1. We're going to be talking about one of the greatest players of all time. The Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays.
Willie Mays, one of a top 3 player of all time, has to be, right?
Absolutely, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, this is a whole Giants episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the second time we've done that one. Perfect.
Oh, yeah, and I have my my mom went to San Francisco a couple years ago and got me a San Francisco shirt, so I'll have that ready for the episode.
All right.
Yeah, this is super, super exciting. And yeah, that leads to the conclusion of our episode. if you are listening just audibly, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is STBNL with Chris Gianta and Daniel Curran. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Chris_Gianta. If you want to follow Daniel on Twitter, you can follow him at Daniel_Curran. And I hope you all enjoyed this episode about Albert Pujols and the 1995 Braves. And we will see you next week when we are talking about Willie Mays and the 2014 San Francisco Giants. See you next time.